Hello and welcome to Climate Change Roundtable, episode, I am not sure, I forgot to check again. Joining me today, as usual, is Sterling Burnett. Sterling, I can hear your fan. It must be hot there in Texas. How you doing?
Yeah, the air conditioner, not the fan, but yeah.
Fair point. Yeah,
it's warm. It's warm.
Back when I lived in Louisiana, I always said that whoever invented air conditioning literally deserves the Nobel Peace Prize because I would have probably gone insane and hurt people if I couldn't have cooled down.
Well, it's unclear. It's unclear how many people who currently live in Texas would live here if there were no air conditioning. That's sure. So, I mean, there's benefits and costs, right?
True.
If you can live with it and you don't like population, maybe air conditioning wasn't such a grand idea. But
and a lot of people don't like population. All right. Also, we have Anthony Watts. Anthony, looks like you're back home finally after the surface station trip.
Yep, I've been out all over the nation from east to west to north to south looking at weather stations, and boy, am I tired.
I hear that. And Linnea Lukin, as usual, always consistent. How are you, Linnea?
I'm doing just fine. It's hot here too, but once again, thanks air conditioning guy, whoever that is.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, so today we're going to talk about essentially a story that came from, I say Sky News, but it's been reported everywhere, about how a senior banker at HSBC has been suspended because he came out against the climate catastrophe narrative, I'll call it. So the way that the story is being represented in the corporate media is that he's saying that they're using this quote, "Always some nut job telling me about the end of the world." His name is Stuart Kirk, and it's not some nut job. What essentially he said is that climate change isn't some giant catastrophe that's going to kill all of us. And he, like many people in the big business world, came out and said it, which so many people are scared to do because they're getting suspended or they're getting fired or their career prospects are being hurt. So first,
it's like a scene from Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Remember the end of that where he's like,
no.
That's what they're doing to this guy.
That is
well, and let's be clear who he is. He's not just some random banker at HSBC.
No, senior.
But of a particular branch of HSBC. Responsible investing. This is
He's
the
like
guy
their
that's in
ESG
charge.
guy.
Yeah, he's their ESG guy. And he was going to give a speech. He did give a speech. He was sanctioned to give the speech. He ran the speech past the higher ups.
Yeah.
And then after giving the speech he said he was going to give that they reviewed, when the blowback came and how they could not have anticipated the blowback in this day and age, I don't know. But after the blowback came, suddenly they throw him under the bus like he's some random outlier that we had no idea. Oh gosh, that doesn't reflect our corporate policy. He didn't say climate change wasn't happening. All he said was it's not a disaster. And as far as from a social investing point of view, there are many more immediate and pressing issues like, say, hunger around the world or pandemics or energy poverty or poverty itself. I mean, he just went through a litany of ills that actually affect people nowadays and says, look, something 100 years from now that's not going to be a disaster but could have some cost doesn't rank. And for that, they suspended him. Like I said, he's the head of their social investing, and they pretend like they didn't know this was coming. It's weird.
Yeah, they just didn't anticipate the blowback. Exactly what you said. They couldn't anticipate how many nut jobs would come out of the woodwork and say, oh my God, the guy is saying something that's sacrilegious. Let's burn him. Literally, that's what they're doing.
Yeah, but to say that, have they not been reading the news or seeing anything on the television for the past 20 years? To say they couldn't anticipate it just means that they're like ostriches with their head in the sand.
They live in a bubble. Most executives live in a bubble, and that bubble is associated with their company and their company interest. And so they tend not to look at the rest of the world. And so that's probably why they were surprised.
Yeah, I mean, so, and you guys mentioned this, but specifically, they say that this presentation was internally approved before he actually gave it. So they knew this was happening. And then when the blowback came, they're like, whoa, now that we actually, that the media is coming after us, we entirely changed. We're against this in general. Linnea, so I wanted to ask you, obviously, Stuart Kirk, the ESG banker, said that the climate change risks are unsubstantiated. He came out against the United Nations. He came out against, I think, the Bank of England. I might have that part wrong. But so what do you think? Is it within the rights of a business to start firing or suspending people for their scientific views? I mean, we're a free market think tank. We want people with free market views, but that's because that's generally what we do. I mean, where do you fall on this?
Well, it's especially a tough situation when it's a bank, because banks have fiduciary obligations to the people who use them, their customers, and they're obligated to present honestly their opinions or their analysis of the directions that the market is headed in, and in the kind of responsible investments that people can make with their bank. The idea that this guy, gave his straightforward opinion and his analysis, which he was paid to do, it's his job to do an analysis of this. And he came up and found that it really is not a very smart thing to be investing so heavily in all this green stuff and to, focus on the ESG stakeholder style of investment. And then he's fired for it, or he's suspended for it.
Yeah.
I think it reflects poorly on the bank because they are specifically ignoring their responsibilities to the customer. For political gain.
And Sterling, I'll go to you with this one. I think it's more than political gain. I think it is to secure their role in the ESG standard future. The head of, or the chief executive officer, his name's Noel Quinn. He said that Stuart Kirk's messages are inconsistent with HSBC's strategy and do not reflect the views of senior leadership of HSBC or HSBC management. He then says, our ambition is to be the leading bank supporting the global economy and the transition to net zero. Sterling, do you think that this is that there could be a financial reason that they're going so heavily in on the climate change standards? Essentially, that they're, I mean, I'll let you take it from here.
They're hoping to benefit from the largesse from governments, right?
Yeah.
They're hoping to benefit from the largesse of large investment portfolio funds like BlackRock wanting to keep investing in them. They're not looking out for their, I don't know how, HSBC is incorporated, whether it's people own stock in it, but they're certainly not looking out for their customer base. Yeah. To say net zero is to say we want to lose money. It's to say we want the world to be poorer in the future, to not function properly, to not have electricity on time, on demand, to not be able to get our cars across the country without having to stop 12 times for hours at a time to charge. They're calling for a reversal of the economic progress of the 20th and 21st centuries. So that can't be good for their customers. But they think, I believe, that the government's going to make it all up. They'll just print money and give it to banks who are woke. And the thing is to say, I don't know the senior man. I don't know, the head of the company.
Yeah.
But Stuart Kirk is not some guy off the street. He was, until suspension, he was the guy that was responsible for assessing these things. The senior manager involved in making wise financial decisions on behalf of this bank for social responsibility investing. And he came to a conclusion that they knew about in advance and are now disavowing. And like you said, they hope to benefit. How? They hope that governments will bail them out when everything else fails.
Yeah, and I mean,
they hope that they suspect, I suspect, that they'll be retired before the bank collapses on their greenwashed millions, because they won't be around when net zero hits in 2030 or 2035. They'll be sitting in their cushy homes on the beach or their yachts, flying their private jets on
the beach is going to be underwater. How can they do that?
Well, yeah, I don't know. I guess they'll go visit Obama's house. Oh, wait, that'll be underwater too. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's crazy why all these, elites are moving to the beach when they're obviously all going to be underwater. And going along with that, we're all going to be underwater point. Stuart Kirk's entire position coming out against this climate catastrophe movement, coming out against sustainable investing, which is just great that someone at the top of HSBC was willing to do this. Anthony, is he right that the United Nations is exaggerating the risks of climate change in general?
Oh, of course he is. And in fact, there's a lot of evidence of it. I mean, for example, in 1989, a UN official said in an article in the Associated Press that entire nations would be wiped off the face of the earth due to climate change-induced sea level rise. Well, of course, that's never happened. But, they believed it back then. And this was based on model projections, the model projections that were just totally unrealistic. And then in the early 2000s, the United Nations said 50 million climate refugees will start, evacuating from their countries, going out to different places, and then trying to find, new places to live, because climate change is making their place impossible to live in, whether it was, sea level rise or heat or whatever. And that didn't happen either. And then in 2010, they disappeared that statement off of their website, and we caught them on it. And I published it on WhatsApp with that and showed that they had disappeared this because there wasn't not one climate refugee at all. And there was this one guy from Kiribati, which is one of the islands out in the Maldives, that claimed a climate refugee status about 5 years ago. One guy. And he tried to emigrate, I think, to New Zealand it was. And New Zealand said, I'm sorry, your claim is a bunch of crap. Go back home. Seriously. So there is absolutely zero climate refugees, as predicted by the UN, to be 50 million. 0 out of 50 million. That's the track record. And the problem is with these folks is that they don't look at things numerically or logically, like this banker did. He looked at things numerically and logically, whereas the UN is looking at this from a political and emotional standpoint, and that's the problem. And the folks that are out there that don't have the skills or the wherewithal to figure this stuff out on their own, to know that these claims are totally overwrought, are completely taken in by this. And they believe truly that the world is on its way to hell in a handbasket due to climate change coming in the future.
You can go to Climate Realism or Climate at a Glance and see hundreds at this stage of articles refuting projections that they have made of climate disaster, that hurricanes would get worse. They're not getting worse. They're not more frequent or more powerful. That flooding would be worse. It's not. That wildfires would go up. They're going down globally. UN reports
crops would be decimated.
People would starve. Crops would be decimated. Crops are setting records. UN reports have referenced gray material, not peer-reviewed material, but some environmental group puts up a report that says, the glaciers in the Himalayas will disappear by 2030. And then the scientists that are studying the glaciers have to correct the UN, the IPCC, and say, that's bull. There's no evidence of that whatsoever. We don't even know where they got that. And of course, there's no reference in it that it was just a claim they made that the UN stuck into its document as if it was valid. The point is, it doesn't matter what climate catastrophe you choose, what worsening you choose. Their projections have been wrong about it 100%. 100 for 100. And yet, we are supposed to say, well, but they might be right in the future. So what's really important is we anticipate really, really bad future disasters, despite the fact that everything it's based upon has been wrong.
Yep. And
Yeah.
they keep moving the goalpost forward. You know, back in 1989, when they made that claim about nations being wiped off the face of the earth, that was for the year 2000, you know? Oh, that didn't happen. So they keep moving the goalpost forward. And now the big goalpost that everybody talks about is the year 2100. And that's all based on climate models. And as we know, one of the most cited climate models in the media, RCP 8.5, was shown to be completely impossible. We could burn all the fossil fuels on the planet in existence, above and below ground, and that would not even get us to the level of the projection in RCP 8.5. Would never happen. And yet the UN and other entities are looking at this as like it's some kind of gospel for the future.
Yeah, you know, I actually want to go back to the article for a second here, because there are some comments from a guy named, you know, I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce this. Bo, Linnea, you're in Louisiana. I'm sure you know how to pronounce this. Beau, is that Bo?
Yeah, it's Bo.
Perfect. I knew you'd be the person to ask. All right. So he says, and he's a Bank of Our Future campaigner, that this opens up a new can of worms for HSBC, referring to Stuart Kirk's presentation. And then Bo added, the bank must now explain how such offensive and inaccurate comments were signed off, to what extent other senior execs share Kirk's views, and what sort of culture HSBC is breeding that allowed the comments to pass unchallenged. There may be other employees with his similar views in the woodwork, given the bank's level of fossil fuel financing. I have so many things I want to say about this, but Linnea, what does this passage just say to you?
Well, before I say that, I apologize that my dog is barking.
I was wondering whose dog it was.
Yeah, I mean, the comparisons have been made before, but this is so clearly just a paranoid witch hunt. You know, they're like, oh my gosh, there's a guy in this company who is not totally in line with what we have been saying is the truth forever. Yeah. How many could there be others that think this way? Oh my gosh. You know, they're just losing it over it. And it's pretty funny. Well, but considering that, you know, considering that companies like Exxon and BP and stuff invest just insanely heavily in the green technology and ESG stuff generally, I would say that they probably don't have to be too worried about the fossil fuel portfolio of HSBC.
Yeah. This is what they're doing. Invasion of the body snatchers. They're pointing out people. There may be other people in your company.
Yeah. You have
Anthony
to watch out. It could
Anthony
be
just me in the private chat. That's good.
It's if you see something, say something writ large and in an inappropriate forum. I mean, you know, it's one thing if you're concerned about terrorism or something. It's another thing entirely if you're the guy in your you know, your Dilbert-like cubicle happens to hold a different political view than you and happens to say, you know, admit that he holds, oh yeah, I voted. Let's say I voted for Trump. Oh my God, we got to purge that guy.
I mean, that was a real concern for a lot of people, saying like, at least in Illinois, for me, it's like if I say I voted for Trump, it's crazy.
Well, and I think that this is something that they've kind of, they being the alarmists, have kind of boxed themselves in this way, because the way that they frame the questions about, you know, asking people, oh, do you believe in climate change? Well, pretty much anyone scientifically minded is going to say, yeah, the climate changes. Yes. So when someone comes up and says, you know, CO2 is not a catastrophic threat to the existence of life on planet Earth, it takes them by surprise. Yeah, it takes them by surprise. And they're going to have to come up with some kind of standard to figure out who's a witch and who's not, like Monty Python sketch or something.
Anthony just sent me a Dilbert. I'm curious. No, sorry, take it, Sterling.
Maybe Kirk turned somebody into a Newt. I don't know.
He got better.
Yeah. So, you know, I don't want to read too far into this just because it is one isolated event. But at the same time, Sterling, does this make you hopeful that someone high up in HSBC, especially being their sustainable investments guy, came out against the climate catastrophe story? Or does it frighten you that the moment someone, you know, got out of line, they suspended him immediately and came out as a company against him?
It's both. I guess it affects me both ways. It shows me that there are reasonable people within these organizations.
Yeah.
where there's one, there's probably more than one at HSBC. Largely because actually there's more than one person at HSBC and other banks who can do rational analyses of the threats to investments, to stocks, to businesses. So there are probably a lot of quiet people not saying the truth out loud. The fact that when someone does bravely do that, I'm still puzzled by the fact that HSBC signed off on it. But the fact that when he did what HSBC approved of, the speech, and then he's called to the carpet, it sets two examples. It's an example of bravery that I'd like to see others, lots of others, thousands of others at these banks, millions of others across the globe follow. Say, we're mad and educated as hell, and we're not going to take it anymore.
Yeah.
At the same time, it shows that, we don't know what will finally happen to Kirk, but it shows that there's a quick reaction and punishment will come. And the old saying, free speech ain't free. Well, being honest about climate change comes with cost. And while I hope a lot of people are willing to bear it, my suspicion is a lot of people will be scared.
I agree with you entirely. Now, Al Gore did come out and talk about this story. So I'm going to play a video clip here, and then Anthony, it's the voice of truth. I mean, he's super serial. South Park reference for anyone who got it. Man, bear, pig. I'm super serial.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love that you like South Park, Sterling. All right, so let's play this clip.
You're too young to remember a writer named Michael Kinsley, who was a brilliant writer. And he once said that for politicians in D.C., the definition of a gaffe is when they accidentally tell the truth. Well, last week, an executive in charge of ESG and sustainable investing for one of the largest banks in the world committed that kind of gaffe. He said, who cares if Miami is under 6 meters of water later this century?
He never said that.
Well, who cares? It's a relevant question. And he's not the only one who is committing hypocrisy, because if you look at the 60 largest banks.
All right, this is good.
Last year.
So I found this extremely interesting, and specifically Al Gore. I was forgetting his name. I was still thinking about Man Bear Pig. Al Gore says that a gaffe is when you accidentally tell the truth. And then he says this HSBC executive made a gaffe and said that, climate change isn't this huge problem. Did Al Gore just secretly reveal that he's not, truly in line with his own rhetoric, that he doesn't actually think the world's going to end?
Well, it wasn't so much of a secret. I mean, it was pretty clear to anybody who can watch that video clip. I mean, goodness, the Gore is just 100% on board with the world is coming to an end and we have to do something about it. Meanwhile, he owns homes that use massive amounts of energy, and I think he's got a new home that's on the coast now. And he talked about hypocrisy. Well, hypocrisy, thy name is Al Gore. The guy has made millions and millions of dollars from climate change alarmism. And so this one guy comes out who's an analyst and says, hey, it's not such a bad thing. Climate, yes, is changing, but no, it's not a crisis. No, we're not going to have these, doom scenarios that are being pushed out there. I mean, the climate doomers literally are running the headlines in most of the media these days. And this guy's basically trying to put the brakes on it. Kirk is trying to put the brakes on it at HSBC by saying, yes, climate change is real, but it's not a catastrophe. And Gore flat out lied when he said that Kirk said that I don't care that Miami is underwater. Kirk never said that. Gore said that. And Gore is patently lying when he says that.
And Gore, Anthony's right. Look, he's got a house that uses more electricity in a single month than my house uses in a single year.
Yeah,
right. Private jet too.
And a private jet. And while he says and goes around the world in his private jet telling people how concerned he is about climate change, he was a large investor in a television station. And when that television station went up for sale,
Oh yeah.
who did they sell it to?
Al Jazeera.
Well,
Al Jazeera.
not just the United
yeah.
Arab Emirates and Dubai, which make all their money off oil and gas.
So I
So
think
he
it may
wasn't
have been Qatar.
above profiting from oil and gas when it allowed him to buy his private jet.
Yeah. So I mean,
Yeah.
What's good for he is not good for thee, folks.
so Al Gore did sell his I don't remember what he called his network, but he sold it to Al
Start
Jazeera.
with a G. Start with a G.
Yeah,
So-
I wish I. But yeah, so he sold it to Al Jazeera, which is primarily funded by Qatar, which is receives most of its wealth from fossil fuels. But then, you know, you could make the argument that if Al Jazeera came in and continued the same programming, then at least they're still pushing the message that Al Gore wanted. But no, they scrapped entirely everything that Al Gore had done and just used its distribution network to launch their own. And because it's Al Jazeera funded by Qatar, pro-fossil fuel news network. So he literally, and I believe he pocketed $100 million from this. I did a lot of research on this a while ago. But yeah, sold it to Al Jazeera, funded by Qatar, fossil fuel wealth, so they could start a news network that did not align with Gore's thoughts. It's the utmost epitome of hypocrisy.
Yep. Right. But you don't see anyone going at Al Gore. They don't do that because, you know, he's like the savior. That's how they view him.
Well,
Which is sad because he's really dumb.
Oh yeah, he's the generation's Paul Ehrlich, right? Paul Ehrlich is a scientist. He's still alive. It's amazing. He's a scientist. I believe he was at Stanford.
That's a loosely used term for him.
He made hundreds, if not thousands, of predictions over his career. Was on all the talk shows for predicting doom, disaster, starvation, flooding, and as far as I've been able to ascertain, he's never been right once. He lost money. He actually put his money where his mouth is, betting on some of his predictions, and lost money. But he's still invited to speak, and Al Gore's the same, despite the fact that he's been wrong on everything, as far as I can tell, throughout his career almost.
Right. Yeah.
He's still
He
invited
invented
to
the internet.
Davos and the World Economic Forum and other places to speak on things of which he knows very little. But he does know,
Right.
to his credit, he knows how to make money.
Yeah, and he knows how to convince people. You may remember from his movie that came out in 2005, 2006, An Inconvenient Truth, you know, and he's talking about the plight of the polar bears, right? And he's got this little animated short clip that shows this polar bear swimming through the water who's drowning because he can't get anywhere. Well, the polar bear is famous for being able to swim up to 100 miles in the ocean. That's why it's named Ursus maritimus, the ocean swimming bear. That's what its name is. But more importantly, the polar bears are threatened and they're drowning because they can't find sea ice to sit on anymore, was predicated on one polar bear, one, that was discovered floating in the ocean by a survey done by I think it's the Mining and Minerals Department of the U.S. Interior. One guy's flying over in a helicopter and sees this polar bear drowned in the ocean after a big storm.
Yeah.
Big, you know, it's like a 1 in 30-year event kind of storm that went through there. One drowned polar bear. Well, you know how the media loves to take things and just run with it and exaggerate it. That's what happened in this case. That one polar bear became the poster child for Al Gore's movie, you know, that the polar bears are drowning due to climate change because it's melting the Arctic sea ice.
Yeah, and you know, the same thing happened with National Geographic, and I pulled the picture up here where they released a story about they released a video showing this polar bear starving. They said this is what climate change looks like. And the blowback was actually so severe that they had to walk back those comments, which is a positive because taking a video of one starving animal is indicative of one starving animal and nothing else. I mean,
the bear was actually, according to Dr. Susan Crockford, a zoologist who specializes in polar bears, that bear had an internal problem, likely an intestinal problem, you know, an infection or something that caused this to happen. It isn't anything indicative of the bear's inability to catch seals or whatever and sustain itself due to lack of sea ice. It's just an internal problem. I mean, the same thing happens to people. You get something internally that messes you up and you starve to death. It happens. That's life.
Look, the mainstream media does this all the time. The BBC's done it. Richard Attenborough, I think it's Richard Attenborough or David Attenborough, whichever one does the knighted
thing?
guy that does it. Yeah, the walrus thing.
Yeah.
All these walruses are dead. They were forced over a cliff.
They're committing suicide due to climate change.
Due to climate change. And it turns out it wasn't polar bears or climate change. It was the cameramen themselves that scared the polar bears over the
Seriously?
cliff.
That's horrible.
Yeah, great. It made a great photo op.
Yeah.
I mean,
fit into the narrative. You know, it made the narrative, but
it's Disney's Lemmings all over again.
I'm surprised. I'm surprised. I'm almost surprised that animal welfare groups didn't go after him after that. Because...
Oh, well, no, they get a pass because it was climate change. You know, one of the most persistent memes in the world had to do with lemmings going over the cliff. I'm sure you've all heard about lemmings jumping over the cliff. And that comes from a Disney movie about, you know, wild animals and stuff that came in the early 60s. The bottom line is that it turns out that the Disney photographers actually set this up and they staged it. And they set it up to scare and push the lemmings over the cliff. Lemmings don't jump over the cliffs naturally, but they only do it in Disney movies because they have been set up to do that.
Yeah, you know, we got a comment here from Gary Kumper. I apologize if I pronounced your name wrong, Gary, but he says, notice how all things climate change, people can't see or measure for themselves. And I actually think this is a very astute comment because, and I was thinking this earlier when you said that the new year they're setting for climate, you know, catastrophe is 2100. They've set it far enough off in the distance this time that it gives them an ample breathing room to say like, there's there's noise in the movement of temperature or in the amount of extreme weather events. If you set it so far off in the distance, it makes it more abstract. And it's just like climate change. I mean, you'll see all these articles or you'll see on the news how extreme weather is killing so many people and things are so much worse. And then your actual day-to-day experience doesn't show that at all. But Patrick Moore put out this theory, and I don't know it off the top of my head. Patrick Moore is one of the founders of Greenpeace, who now is not very Greenpeace friendly. But he basically says that it's like the theory of existential threats or something, where the best way to influence the populace is to choose a threat that's so far away and just so abstract that there's no way for them to actually have a concrete sense of what's really going on. So, Gary, I just wanted to comment on what you said here. I think it's a very astute comment. But moving forwards, and we're already at the 32-minute mark, but I do just briefly want to highlight the fact that there are some people that are coming out against ESG, climate change, scores, all that. And that would be Elon Musk, who recently has decided to become, first off, pretty awesome. I'll just say that off the bat. I think he's pretty cool. But second, his Tesla, go for it, Sterling.
Go ahead to Musk.
So I was going to say that Tesla essentially was removed from the S&P 500 top ESG companies. And I mean, Tesla is literally like the most prominent electric vehicle company in the world. And to think that they were removed from that list, and this happened after Musk got political, while ExxonMobil, and I have nothing against Exxon, but they're top 10 on the list, and Tesla's not even on it. It's just, it makes it seem A, highly political, and B, absurd.
It's green indulgences.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a company that can afford to pay for as much of the social and economic and the stakeholder leanings and everything, and your green investments, like as expensive or as wealthy as the Tesla company is, they're not ExxonMobil. They're never going to be able to install the kind of offshore wind investments that Exxon has put in. They're never going to be able to donate as much money as Exxon does to green initiatives. So it's just the sale of indulgences in order to keep certain companies at the top of the list. And it's going to be funny what companies are there. It's going to be like ExxonMobil, Johnson & Johnson, it's not going to be companies that you would think of initially.
Yeah.
Well, it's on that, the indulgences, literally, until I think last year or the year before, I was just interviewing someone on this for a podcast yesterday. Mm-hmm. The majority of Tesla's money was made on the sale of green indulgences because his cars produce no discernible carbon dioxide in their operation, not about who's charged, what is charged for the stuff or its manufacturer, but during its operation, he gets a lot of credits from California that he can sell on the open market. And so GM and Ford and Exxon come to him and buy his carbon credits. So he generates carbon credits, and he's being punished for generating, for being the greenest company out there because he generates the most carbon credits of anyone. And everyone else is getting credit for buying his carbon. Oh, we're green. How do you know? Well, we bought a lot of carbon credits. Who'd you buy them from? Well, it turns out it's Elon Musk, but let's not talk about that.
Yeah, they act sorry.
Go ahead. I just wanted to point out, I forget what was said earlier about, scaring people. And I just wanted the Mencken quote, I think is perfect for it, which is the whole aim of practical politics is to keep the populace alarmed and hence clamorous to be led to safety by menacing it with an endless series of hobgoblins, all of them imaginary. That's the whole distant, going into the future. 100 years from now, you'll be dead 100 years from now. Well, yeah, I'm going to be dead 100 years from now. Even if I could live to 150, I'll be dead 100 years from now. So, you make the hobgoblin bad enough, you put it off in the distance, and if that doesn't work, you come up with a new hobgoblin to scare the populace into doing your bidding if you're the government.
Yeah, and I also just wanted to go back briefly to what Linnea said, that Tesla will never be as big as ExxonMobil. I actually just looked up their market cap. Tesla is $777 billion, and then ExxonMobil is $411 billion. So, in terms of just how the market values them, Tesla is almost twice as valuable. And saying that, I think they're overvalued to a degree, but I thought that was interesting. Outside of that, Tesla was actually removed from the ESG, the S&P 500 ESG list due to, they said that there was discrimination in one of their, I don't know if it was a manufacturing facility or something. And then they also said that there were accidents related to self-driving cars, which kind of just seems like they were cherry picking anything they could to get Elon Musk out of there. Just at least my personal take.
Well,
I've heard.
We always, we're a climate focused podcast, but if we recall that ESG also involves making sure that your staff is a particular percentage diverse enough from different groups. If there aren't enough women leading up departments in Tesla, then that could keep them off the list no matter how green they are.
We need more color on this roundtable.
Look, I've heard there's a rumor going around that other car companies have had cars that have wrecked and have cars that are wrecked because of internal breakdowns. They do these things called recalls. I'll wager GM might be on the list of the green ESG companies, and yet it had to recall all its electric vehicles because they spontaneously combusted in people's garages or on the streets. But they still made the list. So it was trumped up. They're going after him because he's calling out. He's telling them the emperor wears no clothes.
Yeah, entirely. It's just, and I think he even tweeted like, "Get ready for the political attacks to come at me."
I like to call it the emperor wears rayon, which is made from petroleum.
The Emperor's New Groove was a movie I liked when I was
there. You go.
Right, Anthony, you sent me a chart. Do you want to briefly just say what it is?
Yeah. Well, this. I sent two of them. There's this one, and then there's another one. Let's go to the other one first, because I want to show the one right below that. And this is from a comment upstream we had from Mr. Kemper, who talked about. He said, "Notice how all things climate change that's something that people can't see or measure for themselves." So this is what it looks like. What it looks like when you actually compare the global temperature produced by the NASA Goddard Institute for Space Studies, GISS. This is what you get. No, not that one.
Yeah, I think you sent the same image twice. That's why I'm confused.
Okay, in any event, my point here is that you see these graphs that are produced in the media where the temperature is just accelerating, going almost straight up. But when you actually take the data and put it into the scope of human experience on the planet, what a thermometer from top to bottom actually reads, the stuff we experience, and all the different zones in our planet, from Antarctica to the Sahara Desert to Death Valley. This is what it looks like when you plot the data, when you take away the anomalies that they like to plot in. It's essentially flat. Bottom line is that if we didn't have statistical methods to extract and present these very high slope graphs, we would not even notice it. It wouldn't be noticeable.
Yeah. I mean, and then if you just look at the satellite record versus the surface stations that obviously you're showing are all hopelessly flawed, Anthony, it removes a lot of the heating that they claim is going on. And I'm not saying there's no warming in the last, couple decades. I'm just saying that the degree of warming is highly over exaggerated. I had a few tweets I was going to show of Elon Musk. My favorite was chocolate milk is so damn good. I loved that tweet because I kind of agree. But we're already at the 40-minute mark. Do any of you have any comments on either Stuart Kirk or Elon Musk? Just closing comments before we wrap up for the day. I will take that as a no. Then, all right, time to awkwardly end this as usual. Thank you for joining us today. We're live every Friday at noon, Climate Change Roundtable. I will try to remember what episode we're on next week. I've been reading your comments, and I see some of the suggestions. They will be incorporated. Outside of that, subscribe to the channel. Wait, I made a fancy graphic for this. I got to show it. Come on, the fancy graphic makes the outro. There we go. Subscribe to the YouTube channel so you see all the videos we release. I'm actually doing a video editing a video of Linnea's right now where she goes like really in depth on liquid natural gas, and it's premium content, if I may say so myself. So, yep. All right. Goodbye, everyone. Enjoy your weekend. Let's say goodbye to the good folks. I apologize that my graphic is covering up your face, Anthony.
All right. Adios, guys.
Have a happy Memorial Day and thank a veteran near you.
Cool.